What you just saw wasn't a tantrum, it was a script that child had learned just minutes before. The frightening part? They learned it without any instruction, without any reward, and without any punishment. They learned it just by watching. This single, controversial experiment from the 1960s ripped up our understanding of human behavior, and forced us to ask a question we're still wrestling with today. Where does our aggression really come from? To understand this experiment, you have to picture the world in the early 1960s. Television was exploding. For the first time, families had this magic box in their living rooms, piping in stories and images from the outside world. And with it came a new anxiety. Parents and psychologists started wondering, what is all this new screen violence, the cartoon anvils, the cowboy shootouts, doing to our kids? At the time, the leading theory of behavior, called behaviorism, had a simple answer. Led by psychologists like B.F. Skinner, they believed we only learn through direct reinforcement. You get a cookie for being good, a reward, or you get a timeout for being bad, a punishment. Simple. Learning by just watching, that wasn't really on the table. But one psychologist at Stanford University, Albert Bandura, wasn't so sure. He suspected we were missing a huge piece of the puzzle. He believed that we are social creatures who learn from each other in a far more subtle and powerful way than we ever imagined. And he designed an experiment so simple, yet so profound, it would change psychology forever. Bandura's hypothesis was simple. If a child sees an adult behaving aggressively, will they imitate that aggression, even without any incentive? To test this, he recruited 72 preschoolers from Stanford's own nursery. He divided the children into 3 main groups. Group 1 would watch an adult model behaving aggressively towards a Bobo doll. Group 2 would watch an adult model behaving non-aggressively, just playing quietly in the room. And Group 3, the control group, would see no model at all. So picture this. A child is brought into a playroom. In one corner, there are fun activities like stickers and prints. In the other corner, there's the Bobo doll, a mallet, and an adult model. For the kids in the aggressive group, what they saw was shocking. The model shouted specific phrases like, "Sock him in the nose," and "Pow." It was a choreographed, memorable display of violence. For the other group, the adult model simply ignored the doll and played quietly with the other toys. After 10 minutes of observation, the child was taken to a second room, and this is where it gets really clever. And a little cruel. This room was filled with the best toys a kid could ask for. But just as the child started to play, the experimenter would step in and say, "You know what? I've decided to save these very best toys for the other children." They then took the fun toys away, leaving the child frustrated and annoyed. Now, why would they do this? It sounds mean, right? But it was a crucial part of the design. Bandura needed to give every child a reason to feel aggressive. He was leveling the playing field. This way, if the children acted out, he'd know it wasn't just because they were having a bad day. It was because of what they'd seen. Finally, the child was led into the third room and left alone. The stage was set. The question was, what would they do now? Researchers watched through a one-way mirror, documenting everything, and the results were immediate and undeniable. The children who had witnessed the aggressive adult were dramatically more violent towards the doll. They didn't just punch it. They recreated the exact same sequence of aggression they had seen. They used the mallet, they kicked it, they threw it, and they even yelled the same things like, "Sock him in the nose." They had learned an entire script for violence just by observing. The children who saw the non-aggressive model, and the kids in the control group, they were far, far less aggressive. They might have poked the doll or played with other toys, but the unique, learned violence was almost completely absent. But there were other, fascinating layers. Bandura also tested whether the sex of the model and the child mattered. He found that boys were more likely to imitate physical aggression, especially from a male model. It was a powerful early indicator of how gender roles might be learned through observation. The conclusion was inescapable. Skinner was wrong, or at least his theory was incomplete. We don't just learn from cookies and timeouts, we learn from watching. This revolutionary idea became known as social learning theory. So what is social learning theory? Bandura broke it down into 4 essential steps, and you use them every day, probably without even realizing it. First, there's attention. You can't learn anything if you're not paying attention. The children in the experiment were focused on the adult, just like you might focus on a YouTube tutorial to learn how to fix a leaky faucet. Second is retention. You have to remember what you saw. The children didn't just see the aggression, they formed a mental representation, a memory of the script. They stored it away for later. Third is reproduction. You have to actually have the ability to perform the action. For the kids, hitting an inflatable doll was easy. For you, learning a complex dance move might require more practice before you can reproduce it perfectly. And finally, the most important step, motivation. You need a reason to use the learned behavior. In a follow-up experiment, Bandura showed that if the children saw the adult model being punished for their aggression, they were less likely to copy it. If they saw the model being rewarded with praise and snacks, they were even more likely to copy it. Attention, retention, reproduction, motivation. That's the code. It's how we learn to talk, to dress, to act in meetings, and yes, how we can learn to be aggressive. Okay, so kids hitting a doll in a lab is one thing, but what does this mean for you in 2025? The implications are massive and they touch every part of our society. Application 1. The media violence debate. The Bobo Doll experiment is the granddaddy of the debate over violence in video games, movies, and TV. The question is no longer if we can learn from media, but how much it influences us. Social learning theory suggests that constant exposure to characters who solve problems with violence could, for some, provide a script. It doesn't mean everyone who plays a violent game will become violent, but it suggests the media we consume is never just neutral entertainment, it's a model. Application 2, parenting and role models. This is where it gets personal. This theory shows that a parent's most powerful tool isn't lecturing, it's modeling. When you handle stress with a deep breath instead of a yell, you are teaching your child emotional regulation. When you show kindness to a stranger, you are teaching empathy. In a way, every parent is conducting their own Bobo Doll experiment 24/7. You are the model. Application 3, pro-social behavior and education. But here's the beautiful flip side. Social learning isn't just about aggression. It works just as powerfully for good. Teachers who model curiosity and a love of learning inspire students more than any textbook. Anti-bullying programs that use older students to model inclusive behavior are using social learning theory. We can use it to teach cooperation, resilience, and compassion. The mechanism is the same, only the behavior being modeled changes. So, the Bobo Doll experiment did more than just show kids would punch a doll. It held up a mirror to humanity and revealed a fundamental truth about who we are. We are learning machines. We learn from our heroes, our parents, our teachers, and the characters on our screens. Albert Bandura showed that learning is a profoundly social act. We see, we remember, and we do. And that leaves us with a critical responsibility to think about what we're watching and what kind of models we choose to be for others. Now I want to turn the question over to you. After seeing the evidence from Bandura's experiment, where do you land on the media violence debate? Do you believe that video games and movies are a primary driver of aggressive behavior? Or do you think they're just harmless entertainment and the fears are overblown? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments below. I read all of them.